So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into this Q&A, where I'm joined by Tina Kover and Charlotte Coombe. Thank you both so much for joining today. And we're going to discuss translation as a career and a few other bits as well in celebration of Women in Translation Month, which has been a huge success and is about to be over, but really we should keep the conversation going. And just to introduce myself quickly, my name is Caro, and I created this Instagram page, Literatura in Translation, during lockdown to mainly share the love of translated books, normally from Latin America, but other places as well. I grew up in Argentina and have been living in London for about 4 years now, where I work in marketing in Octopus Books, a publishing house part of the Hachette UK group. And I graduated as a literary and technical translator from uni about 7 years ago and have been translating on freelance basis on the side since then. And that's me. And as mentioned, I'm joined by the wonderful translators Tina Kover and Charlie Coombe. Again, thank you guys for being here and agreeing to do this. I'm going to do a bit of an intro for both of you now. So Tina and Charlie are the co-founders of the YouTube channel Translators Aloud, which features literary translators reading from their own work. Tina is an American-born literary translator specializing in both classic and modern literature, including Alexandre Dumas's Georges, the Goncourt brothers, Manette Salomon, and Marie Gubin's Goncourt Prize-winning older brother, a 2020 finalist for the Oxford Weidenfeld Translation Prize. Her work of Nega Javadi's Disoriento won the 2019 Albertine Prize and the Lambda Literary Award in Bisexual Fiction. It was also a finalist for the 2018 National Book Award for Translated Literature, the Penn Translation Prize, the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, and the Scott Moncrief Prize. Very impressive. Full publications include Hervé Legre's In the Shadow of the Fire, winner of the 2020 French Voices Award, Cécile Coulon's A Beast in Paradise, and the non-fiction volume The Science of J.R.R. Tolkien. That's Tina. And Charlie is a British literary translator working from Spanish and French into English. Her translation of Nusas Shalmani's Homini, Said and Me won a Penn Translates Award in 2015. She has translated The President's Room by Ricardo Romero and The Imagined Land by Eduardo Verdi, as well as work by authors such as Maribel Moreno, Orlando Echeverri Benedetti, Lucia Bascaran, Elizabeth Duval, Juan Villoro, Rosa María Rofiel, Santiago Roncagliolo, Edgardo Núñez Caballero, and Jimena González. You're probably laughing at my double L pronunciation right now. Her translations have appeared in publications such as Words Without Borders, World Literature Today, Latin American Literature Today, Project Plume, and Palabras Errantes. She was shortlisted for the Valle Inclán Translation Prize for her translation of Fish Soup by Margarita García Roballo, and was awarded a Penn Translates Award in 2019 for her translation of a novel by the same author entitled Holiday Heart. So that's you guys once again, last time. Thank you both for joining today, and let's talk a bit about translation.
Yes.
So the first question I wanted to ask you was about your project, Translators Aloud. For everyone watching, this is an exciting platform to give literary translators a voice. Can you guys tell me a bit more about the project and what brought you two together into the idea?
Yes. Tina, do you want? I'll go first. So Tina tweeted sometime back in June about wanting to do a reading of her own work and saying, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, like, is it kind of, arrogant to do that? Is it, I feel self-conscious? And loads of people responded on Twitter and said, no, I feel the same, I want to do the same, I want to put readings of myself online, but I don't know how. And this conversation kind of spiraled into, I got involved and was like, let's start a YouTube channel. And Tina was like, yes, let's do it. Yeah, and then we'd set it up within like a day, didn't we?
Yeah, literally by the end of the day, we had this channel, and the response to it has just been so incredible, just immediately, very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
That's
And we've got
amazing.
about
Was this a
500.
lockdown baby? Or
Yeah, kind of. I'd say so. I know we've both felt really pleased to have it to focus on during the lockdown. Yeah, I think it's hard to believe it hasn't even been 3 months yet, because it's just taken off.
that's amazing. And you got lots of subscribers instantly, and you're at quite a lot now, aren't you?
We're 510, I think, at the first.
That's
And
amazing.
13.
13.
No, 13.
We text each other daily
513.
when it goes up.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of spreading the word about it and trying to get people involved, and extending the hand to translators that we know and being like, do you want to do a reading for us? But a lot of it has just been sort of organic, like followers from, we set up a Twitter account, and then obviously they kind of match in terms of numbers. But yeah, we've been also reaching out to publishers and trying to collaborate with some indie presses and having their own playlists on there. And things like that. And we've got a few like exciting collaborations coming up as well. We're trying to think of some features, but we've got some features for International Translation Day and some other sort of longer term collaborations with things like the Borderless Book Club, and just getting translators to promote themselves essentially, which is something that doesn't always come naturally to translators, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually takes me nicely to the second question, which is, what do you guys think it makes a translator often take a supporting role or backup singer attitude when their work is so vital? And I guess in a sense, that's what we are. We translate someone else's work. We are working with someone else's text, but without the translator, that text, that author would just not have a voice in other territories. Do you think this is a self-imposed thing or a more long-established sense that we must remain invisible at all times?
Oh, it's deeply ingrained. I mean, I think over the decades and the centuries, it's never been the case where the translator receives attention as a craftsman, in his or her own right. So I think we've just become so used to that sort of coming out of the shadows, I think for a lot of people does feel quite counterintuitive. But we're trying to change that.
I think it is more of a, like you said, it's very ingrained, it's long established sense of, the invisible translator, by people like Lawrence Venuti. He's got a lot to answer for in that, respect. But there's this thing of, a good translation is one that you can't tell it's a translation. And although I agree with that, like, I also think that increasingly people are accepting that the translator's personality and their own experiences, their own personal take on things, can't help but come through slightly in their work. And I actually think that's like a good thing, because it's what differentiates one translation from another. It's what makes like translation so varied. And if you take the same paragraph and give it to 5 people, those 5 paragraphs will be so different in every translation. And why is that? That's because we're all individuals and we're all humans, and we can't help but put our own slight stamp on it. Like every word you choose is to do with you. Although you're also obviously, recreating the author's words, you have to choose as a translator all the time, like every word, every line, every paragraph, and that's so individual. And I think it's something that people are kind of embracing a bit more and wanting to be proud of their role in bringing that into English.
Definitely. And what you were saying about, a good translation is an invisible translation might apply more to technical texts or other things, but with literature, like you say, something that's so personal, that's impossible to not put a little bit of yourself into that. It's fascinating. We could talk about hours for that. And
Yeah.
my next question is, starting from sharing and supporting support founding projects like yours, like Translators Aloud. What else can we do to change this, not just as translators, but also as readers?
Well, as if I start maybe with what, publishers can do, which I think a lot of them have begun to do, but there's still some work to be done in that area, is making sure the translator gets the credit that's due. This can be naming the translator on the book cover, which some publishers do and some don't. It can be making sure that the reviews of a book in translation focus on the translation, or at least mention it, and the translator, as well as the plot and the author and the book itself. These aren't things that should be glossed over, because a lot of creative and intellectual energy and time goes into producing a translated book. So it should absolutely be celebrated, I think, as part of the process of creation.
It is so surprising. Sorry, go on.
Well, that's okay. No, I'll just really quick. Readers, I think that the best way, and I do think this is also happening more and more, readers are seeking out translated literature and taking an interest in the process themselves. And so then you have, people like Ronan Hessian, who wrote Leonard and Hungry Paul, and he's become extremely interested in translated literature and the translation process. And there are several YouTube channels as well, like Sean the Book Maniac is one, and he's really interested in translation. Lost in Translation is another good podcast. So I think, it's just a question of people who enjoy reading translated literature being vocal about what they like and why they like it, and spreading the word on social media. Helps.
Yeah, I was gonna, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say other authors who, advocate for translated fiction, like Ronan, for example, really, really important. Like, it's getting readers to understand that, translated literature is nothing to be scared of. It's just literature. There should be no barrier to reading it. So
that's right. They're just good books.
Yeah,
it's just, if you like reading translated, take the translating out of it. It's just reading. It's just books.
Exactly. It's just reading good books. Exactly.
There is a bit of a stigma around translated fiction and literature sometimes, that it's going to be difficult or unapproachable or intricate, and people might be a bit put off by that. But I think, like you guys say, publishers and authors and translators and readers are going through a path of realizing that translated fiction can be as approachable and enjoyable, and sometimes really simple, sometimes more intricate, depending on the author. And it's really not anything to be scared about. So we're on the right track, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Awesome. And then moving to your personal trajectories, in terms of starting out, could you both tell me when and how you decided to become literary translators? Tina, maybe do you want to start with this one?
Okay. So I've been a freelance translator for a long time, about 20 years now, a little bit more. And I started out doing commercial translation, which I think is how most translators probably start. And I did that for
bills.
What's that?
Pays the bills.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to kind of, I think, become comfortable with the process and with your own, working methods before you kind of jump into the deep end of a literary translation. So the first book I published was actually self-published first. And that was back in 2003. I chose a book that was in the public domain and translated it sort of for the joy of translating it only, and then self-published it with a Canadian company called Trafford. And then through that, I was able to get an agent, and who then sold the book to a publisher in New York. it's really a crazy story. I don't know anybody else who came into the industry the same way. It was really, it was just so fortunate. I was so lucky. That first book, enabled me to put in a grant application with Penn. This was Penn America, which I didn't end up getting, but they were impressed enough with my sample that I had submitted to kind of pass my name along to a wonderful editor at Modern Library called Judy Sternlight. And she got in touch with me about putting out a new English edition of Alexandre Dumas' Georges. That was 2004, and that was really at the beginning of it.
Wow, that should be a film.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it would have a very slow start, though.
Okay. How about you, Charlie?
In terms of when I decided, I guess I always kind of knew that I wanted to translate literature, but I'm similar to Tina. I have been freelance translating for like 12 years. So I set out freelance in 2008 after a modern languages degree, and during which I'd realized that I really loved translating. Like that was my favorite bit of the whole degree. I was like, every time we had our translation like class, I was like so excited. And I discovered I was like good at it, and it was something I enjoyed. So leaving university, I decided to apply to 800 companies to work in a translation agency, and I got taken on by one and did revision for them for a year. And then after that, I just set myself up freelance and was like, I don't want to be revising translations, I want to be translating. So I went freelance, and after about 3 years, I'd say, I did the DIP Trans, the IOL DIP Trans. And then I just started trying to work out how to become a literary translator. So going to the London Book Fair, going to events, and just basically getting a feel for how it all works and how to get a foot in the door. And then I did a couple of small children's books, which was quite fortuitous because it was a friend messaged me while I was at the book fair and said, I know someone who's looking for a translator, go and meet with her. So I was like, oh, okay. And it turned out she couldn't do she did the whole series herself, but she couldn't do the last 2 books. So she was like, would you like to translate these short books about pirates? And I was like, yes, I would. So I did those. And then I guess after that, I was really I want to translate a book, a full book. So I just started chasing sort of publishers in terms of contacting publishers who I knew had bought the rights to books that I thought sounded interesting, that I'd seen on catalogues of literary agents. So I was doing a lot of emailing, hey, no, you don't know me, but can I do a sample of this book that you've just bought the rights to? And they'd be like, no, go away. And so the first book I did was like that for a literary agency. They said they already had a sample, and I said, well, can I do one anyway? And they were like, okay, and then they preferred mine. So I got that book contract. That was the first full-length book I did. And after that, much of the same for many years, just pitching and trying to get somewhere. And then Caro Press contacted me 3 years ago out of the blue, and they'd seen some work I'd done for an online journal. I think, but I'd actually never asked them how they approached me, but they asked me if I wanted to do the President's Room. Well, they actually asked me, which one do you want to do for our first catalogue, and sent me a 3 to choose from. And I was like, what? It's crazy. So yeah, I chose that one mainly because it was the shortest, and I loved it as well. But it was this is a new publisher for me, and I'm going to choose a short one so I can just really throw myself into it, do it really well, and not be overwhelmed by how long it was or anything. And yeah, and then I've gone on to do 3 books for them. But it was very much I always knew I wanted to translate books, from university onwards, I'd say. And actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an author. So it's kind of come sort of full circle to when I was young, I didn't know I was going to speak French and Spanish, but then I combined it all into sort of the career that I have now. So yeah.
And who knows? I mean, there's still time. You can still be an author, translator and author.
I really struggle with the ideas part. The plot and the characters and the concepts. I'd love to one day have inspiration for that, but we'll see.
Tune in for the next Q&A.
Yeah.
In 50 years' time.
And my next question, I guess, overlaps a little bit with that, but I'm going to read it out anyway because it might gives people some ideas as well. About those all-important first few clients, how did it happen for you, and what advice can you give budding translators, maybe in hindsight, about getting their work out there and getting clients or publishers trusting they're as good as they say when they don't yet have any work published?
Charlie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like from what I've just said, you can see that basically just being really tenacious and contacting people and not being scared to just put yourself out there and say, I am a literary translator. Even if you've only got one thing on your CV, or, you've published one story in a journal or something, you've got to take that plunge and say, I am a literary translator. I can do X and Y for you. Like, I can do a sample for you. I can do a reader's report, although I didn't do hardly any of those in my career. But yeah, I think getting something on your CV, just even if it's like volunteer translation or free, translate a short story for the love of it, and have it just on your CV, just say I've translated this. And I think then just go out there and basically try and meet people online or in real life. Befriend literary agencies and get to know their catalogues and chase things like, go to them and say, can I do a sample? Or if not, can I do one for you in the future? That kind of thing. I'm quite good at just sort of getting out there and being like, probably really annoying. But, if you're nice enough about it, it does tend to get you places, I think.
How about you, Tina? What do you think in hindsight would have helped you, or what would you say if you were mentoring a young translator?
Well, I think it's a lot easier now. Not to say it's easy, but it's very different now than it was when I was first starting out, because there really was almost no social media. And also I didn't have the benefit of living in or near a city that was kind of a center of translation. Like Charlie was lucky enough to have access to London with all its publishers, all its translation companies. I'm from Denver, and back in the day, and even now, it's right smack in the middle of this enormous country. It's not really a very international city. But these days, that doesn't matter so much because of social media. And I mean, obviously, I think word of mouth is still incredibly important. But that comes with time. I think these days it's a lot easier to begin making a name for yourself because you can publish translation in any number of online journals and magazines. Like I said, it's very easy to reach out to huge numbers of publishers and say, if you need a reader's report done, I'm happy to help, particularly around the time of book fairs when they have so many books on their desks to read, in preparation for these book fairs where a lot of the deals get made, and they may not have time to read everything. So it's a great idea, like Charlie said, to be proactive, get your name out there. I think establishing a presence on social media is very important. And you can establish your voice on social media even before you have a lot of published work under your belt. Again, so it's still an uphill process for everybody, no doubt about it. It's a relatively small industry, and it's very competitive. And I think if you think you're going to break in immediately and be handed 3 or 4 books a year, you might be in for a bit of a disappointment. It takes a lot of work. It takes time and dedication. You will get rejected, and you'll continue to get rejected even when you're an established translator. This is the other thing. I don't care who you are. All of us have done a sample for a publisher, even after we have multiple books published and we haven't gotten that project. So all of that is going to happen. So I think there are many ways into the industry, but that still doesn't get around the fact that it takes time and that it's not necessarily a smooth path from point A to point B.
It is hard when you're starting out. That, like your question about getting publishers to trust you when they don't really know who you are. Again, I think it really helps to meet people in person if you can. I did this for one of my books. They were umming and ahhing because I was a bit more emerging and I'd only done sort of one book, and they loved my sample, but they said, how would we know you're going to carry through the quality of the sample throughout the whole book? And I was like, how do you know that for any translator, established or not? You know, you've got to trust me. And I actually met up with the director of the publishing company and had a coffee with him at the book fair, and I just persuaded him just by being like friendly and nice and be like, we got this, like, come on, let's do it. And he was like, okay. But it's just sometimes, there's nothing like actually meeting people, you know, in person, or calling them and having a chat like over Zoom, whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, not everybody, I think, has the opportunity to get to know that, you know, to meet these publishers in person. Certainly, again, we're really fortunate if you're in or near London or New York or Paris. But with Zoom, you know, again, modern technology is really changing the game, I think.
I think now moving forward, it's going to be very different. I think it's going to be way more normal, commonplace to say, let's have a Zoom meeting and talk about it. Whereas you'd never do that. Like, I would never do that before this year, ever.
Even phone calls, people shy away from. People put in their signature, please don't call me, just email me. Whereas now it's a little bit.
I didn't have my phone number on my email for the longest time, 10 years. I was like, I don't want people to call me.
I've never had it on mine.
Actually, I don't think I do now,
actually. That sounds really encouraging and inspiring. Then moving on to specific languages, Charlie, you recently translated, like we said in your intro, Holiday Heart by Margarita Garcia Robacho, and it's an author you translated 2 books by. Can you tell us about any particular challenges you encountered with this particular book or her work in general, and if any are recurrent challenges when translating from Spanish?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot I could say about this. And I did actually speak recently at a event for the Borderless Book Club. I think the podcast is going to be online. But I think, I mean, there's lots of things to do with her use of, you know, colloquial language and things that we had to work out with her and how she wanted them. For example, she wanted to keep a lot of things in Spanish, and with this book, it wasn't going to work because they were just one-off mentions out of context, so nobody would understand them. So those, you know, those kind of little things to do with the language that we discussed with the author. But yeah, I think with Margarita, her style, more so in this book that I've just, in Holiday Heart, than in Fish Soup, actually, I found when I read the book, I was like, wow, I can't wait to start translating. And it's deceptively simple. Like, you get a sentence. I don't know if you've read the Spanish.
I've read it in English. I have this weird thing that I want to read more in Spanish, but living in England just can't do it, so I read them in.
Yeah, well, she has this very sort of deceptively simple style. Like, you'll pick apart a sentence and try and put it back together in English to reflect how sort of sophisticated it is. And I would just be like, oh my God, my head is scrambled. Like, I can't do it. So one particular phrase, I think it's on the blurb on the back of the book, which is, God, I can't think of it off the top of my head now. Anyway, it's on there. And I went through about 15 different permutations, just writing them out. Like, this is like late stage editing because I still wasn't happy with it. I remember lying in bed late one night and suddenly I was like, it came to me, the one that it was. And I emailed my editor and he was like, yes, that's the one. But we've been talking about it for months, you know, it was very much like that with her work. And I feel like, yeah, I don't know, she's a very intelligent writer, and it's hard. She's hard to translate. So yeah, but I mean, every book is hard in its own way. But particularly because I knew her style so well from Fish Soup, I was like, oh, you know, it's not going to be as difficult. But it was much harder with this book for some reason. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy when we think that, because even, I guess you probably saw it with her, we're constantly developing our work and everything, and that probably happened for her as well. So without even realizing, she developed her writing into something different and constantly changing. Yeah. So when you're sort of saying, I've got this in the bag, I'm going to do it really quickly, then it's like, oh wow.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Holiday Heart actually, if she wrote that one before the books that would make up Fish Soup. I have to actually check that. I think it might have been an earlier novella. That's interesting. I will check, because that's a good point. Yeah.
Oh. And Tina, how about you? Similar question. Are there any challenges when translating from French that are recurrent that you've seen in many of your works?
Well, everything I've done a really wide range of books. I've done, you know, 3 that were written in the 19th century, and obviously that language poses its own challenges. Although I've always been such a such an avid reader of Victorian literature that I found when I did my first book and the others as well, that language came surprisingly easy to me, I think, just because I'd read so much of it. So, and that actually is a point that I'll make real quick, going back to your earlier question about what, you know, aspiring translators can do. I think the most important thing somebody who wants to be a translator can do is read. And I mean read widely, read deeply, you know, because so much of your ability as a translator has to do with your command of your own language, of the language you're translating into. And the more you read, the more styles you'll absorb, the more, you know, the more your vocabulary will increase. You know, it's without even realizing it, I think you just soak in the language. And I think that really is what makes the best translators are people who are also passionate readers. So that's that point. So that's been really helpful for me. The biggest challenge that I can think of in recent memory was doing Mahir Guven's older brother, which is the one that's up for the Oxford Wiedenfeld Prize next month. And it's actually so gratifying that that has been nominated for an award, because I worked so hard on that book. It is written from the perspective of 2 young Franco-Syrian brothers who had grown up in, you know, sort of a gritty urban environment. And so their vocabulary it's very urban. It's all slang, you know, and it's Parisian slang sort of peppered with Arabic slang, and they, you know, they meld together. And that was such a challenge. I mean, making that kind of language sound effortless and natural in translation, I think, is honestly, it's maybe the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So thank God there are some really good kind of online dictionaries for that sort of thing. And I encourage people to take full advantage of them, because
the internet, the wonders of the internet.
I honestly do not know what we did before the internet. My God, you know, because anything you want is there in terms of glossaries and lexicons. And, you know, even if you just end up reading somebody's blog or a message board, which I actually did. I spent a lot of time on a message board for like French rap. A lot of time. a lot of time. So again, that's my most recent challenge that comes to mind.
That's fascinating, and that's a whole conversation in itself, isn't it? Just localisms and the really important language. And it's something that no matter how much you read about it or how long you live in a country, it's something that is really difficult to grasp.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's not impossible to translate, as proven by Tina. You know, I have this a lot where people are like, "Oh, have you spent time in Colombia?" I've never been to South America. I've never been to Latin America. And I wrote my translator's note actually for Fish Soup about that very thing. But it's funny you should talk about that now, Tina, because someone just emailed me yesterday, a Venezuelan author that I just translated a short story for. And he said he loves the translation, and he said one final thing is, do you have lots of Venezuelans that you know? Like, there were loads of things in the story that were very Venezuelan, and you didn't ask me about any of them, but you got them all like perfect. And I was I'm penning the email back to him now, where I'm going to say, the internet, my friend. Like
Yeah.
you can find every answer to every question, and it's quite
But
quite
still, that says what that really says is that you have done an amazing. I mean, that speaks to your ability. Really, is what it.
Yes.
So
Research.
I mean,
As well.
there's no such thing as an untranslatable book or an untranslatable sentence. Even it just some take longer and more thought than others. That's all.
And can you guys name, not to put you on the spot, but any maybe one or two resources that you just can't do without?
Word reference.
Word reference.
Is a big one.
Although, yeah, I've become a more frequent user of reverso context.
Yes, I was about to say reverso context is my go-to currently.
Me too.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Amazing. I've not heard of that one, but I'll check it out.
Oh,
Sure.
it's really good. It's really good.
I mean, the dictionaries online are getting so incredible now because I think they're mining all the information from the forums as well. I think, and putting it all in one place so that it's just easily accessible.
Well, they're very much crowdsourced. A lot of them, and that's invaluable. Absolutely invaluable.
But it is, like you said, Tina, it's about, translators knowing what information out there is going to be useful for you and what goes well. So there is still a lot of work to do, even though there's countless resources and work out there.
The dictionaries are tools. They don't do the work. That's for sure. They will do the work for you.
And will never do it.
Yeah. But they're useful. No, they never will. That is true. I do believe they never will. Not literary work, no. But they are very useful tools, if you already know what you're doing.
Awesome. And my next question is an interesting one, I guess. You both translate into your native language, but have you ever tried, or would you like to translate into other languages from English?
No.
No. I just don't think I would ever be any good at it, really. I mean, sadly, I didn't have the, gift of being brought up properly bilingual. And I think unless you have done, or unless you've lived in a country that speaks your second language for a very long time, and become truly, truly assimilated, I think it's incredibly tough.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle like writing emails in French and Spanish on a daily basis. I have to think really hard about it. It takes me a long time, let alone writing literature. But it's interesting. Like I was thinking about this question earlier, and I just realised that Jennifer Croft, she wrote the novel Homesick. She originally wrote it in Spanish, which I found fascinating and had to immediately.
It's not her native language either.
Yeah, but she's lived so long in Buenos Aires, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
That she felt comfortable enough to write a book in Spanish, which is incredible. I'm like, wow.
Did she translate her own book into English then? Or?
Pretty much. I think, from what I can tell, it was the original story. I mean, obviously, she might have just used that as a basis, but essentially, she translated herself into English, which is like nuts.
Is it really translation, or is it just she wrote the story again?
Rewriting.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's a complicated question, translating your own writing, which I think lots of other people have talked about.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
I don't have the high enough level of French or Spanish to write anything literary in it. And in some translation workshops that I've been to, they've asked us to write in our source languages, like just on the spot, like write something in Spanish. And I'm like, what? I can't do that. Like, that's really hard for me.
It's so tough, really difficult. Sadly.
It's a very interesting question, I think. Then moving on to the UK, I guess all territories are different, but it certainly feels a little bit like the UK is experiencing a golden era, or the start of a golden era in translated literature. We touched a little bit about this earlier. But have you guys noticed a recent or gradual growth in interest and readership, both from publishers and readers alone?
Yeah,
I think so.
Absolutely. You want to go first, Charlie?
No, I don't really have much to say on this other than yes, I think people are much more interested in it, and I think there's a lot more publishers doing it and making it a focus and also, you know, bringing their translators to the fore, especially Charco Press. They've done so much for the translators as well as the authors. So yeah, I think it is piquing people's interest, and people are less wary of translated fiction because they're seeing all these like amazing books come out with beautiful covers, and they're like, wow, this is so exciting, you know. And yeah, I think it's, yeah, definitely.
How about you, Tina?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think we're living in an incredible time for literary translation. I really think the genesis of this explosion in popularity and interest probably started with the Elena Ferrante books, you know, the four books. I mean, that I think that has been an amazing, you know, gift for the world of literary translation, because so many people have taken those books to their hearts. And I think that has made them maybe more or less hesitant to pick up other books in translation. So I think that's one thing. And I think then you have the emergence of all these prizes, which is a great thing. I think you have, for example, Olga Tokarczuk winning the Nobel Prize, and the attention that was paid to her translators into many languages as a result of that. I think all of it is not only generating interest, but then feeding off the interest as well. So it's a, you know, it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. And I really hope that'll continue to be the case, because there's so much incredible literature out there in the world that English speakers have been missing out on for decades and centuries. And, you know, the old figure is that 3% of world literature is translated into English. I would hope that that number has increased a little bit in the past 10 years. And I think it has.
I think it has, yeah, definitely. And to your point about Elena Ferrantes and those kind of first few authors, it's a lot of it with literature is about relatability. And when you go browse in a bookshop, you're going to pick up a book maybe for the cover or because you've heard about the author, but then ultimately you're going to buy something that you feel like you're going to relate to. And maybe there's that sort of thing of like, well, this is a person that came from a different country, different culture. How am I going to relate to them? But there's so many stories out there that people are realizing that it's cross-cultural things like feelings, emotions, troubles and challenges, and just life in general. It's not anything that we can put any borders to, I guess.
No, exactly. And I think right now, remembering those things is more important than ever, because, you know, multiculturalism and global citizenship and, you know, international understanding are all under such threat that I think, you know, anything that goes any way toward keeping those doors open and keeping the light shining, you know, into these dark places is, you know, it's priceless.
Definitely. Oh, that's also very encouraging and positive. I like it.
I really believe that. I really think the work we're doing, that all of us are doing, you know, translators and publishers, it's so important right now. So, I mean, it's a responsibility, but it's a source of great pride for me, at least.
Definitely. We're putting our bit in.
Yeah. Yes.
Amazing. And next question is related to this as well, but I guess the process of getting a book translated and published in another territory. Do publishers take the initiative, in your experience, to search for talent in other territories? Or does the translator normally play a big part in the acquisition and introducing authors to commissioning editors?
Yeah, I mean, the translator plays a huge, valuable role in that whole process, and one that often is not acknowledged enough or recognized enough or even remunerated enough, if at all. Because essentially what we do as literary translators is, if we discover a book, you know, we then usually, you know, find out if we can do a sample from the author, then we see if they're represented by an agent, we do all that kind of stuff. and then we'll tell people about it. We'll take that and we'll pitch it to editors. We'll take it to publishers. So we are like little unpaid literary agents, essentially, doing half the job, I would say, of literary agent, but like not some of the stuff to do with rights. But yeah, I mean, we do play a huge role. Yeah, for no money.
Which is a bit difficult.
Although sometimes, so in this year particularly, when I've had authors who want to translate like a short story and they're going to pay me for it, and then they're like, oh, and then we can send it to journals and things, and I say, yeah, we can, but I'm going to charge you for some time. And that's actually worked a couple of times. So usually they're like, oh, I can't afford it, but thank you. And it's like, yeah, recently I've managed to do that successfully and actually get remunerated for my time. So I think it's really important as translators to also advocate for being paid for what we do and the time we put in and the effort we go to, because it's not all about just us then getting a book and getting the glory, because sometimes you don't even end up translating that book or that author, and you do all that work and sometimes you lose that project. It goes to someone else, and that's all part of it. But yeah.
Definitely, and to do with solidarity as well with our colleagues, because if we're doing free work for someone and a publisher realizes that, then the next time they're going to go to a translator that's charging what they should be paid, and then they're going to be like, well, no, I know someone that can do it for free. So it's just a whole kind of worms open.
It's like in commercial translation with not setting your rates too low. It's for the good of the community and your other translators, basically. But to go back to your question, I think some publishers seek out foreign authors themselves, but usually I think it's, agents will go to the publishers and try and put them there, or translators will go directly to publishers. It depends on the size of the publisher and what they're doing. Bigger publishers don't need to seek out talent comes to them. Smaller publishers like Charco, for example, they choose all of their books pretty much because they love them, and then they find the right translator and etc. But yeah, it's different from publisher to publisher, I think.
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything to that one, Tina?
No, I mean, I agree with everything Charlie said. It really is a mixture. You do have a lot of publishers that choose all their own catalogs, and but there definitely is still a very significant role to be played by translators, to find these diamonds in the rough and bring them to the attention of the right people.
Definitely. And do you read a lot, both of you, in French? How do you try to, as readers, try to separate how many books in French or Spanish you read as opposed to, or literature in English, or is that still something that you're trying to figure out?
You go first.
Okay. I do read some in French, but I mostly read to relax. And as much as I love to read in French, it's quite a bit more sort of work for me than reading in English. But I do read in French. In fact, I just finished today Negar Javadi's new novel, her second novel after Disoriental. It literally just came out on the 20th, 5 days ago. And it's absolutely amazing. So that was wonderful. But I do kind of keep an eye on, the French bestseller lists and, the French newspaper, reviews of sort of the latest hot releases in France, the Le Monde, and I do keep an eye on that stuff. And if I'm interested enough, I'll dig a little bit deeper and see if the book sounds like it's worth something I might want to translate. And if you go to the publisher's website, you can generally find out pretty easily if the rights have already been bought, the English language rights. It's not that hard to find it out. Just send a couple of emails. But I've been really fortunate over the past few years in that most of my translation projects have been already selected by the publishers that I work with.
Awesome. On a case-by-case basis, I guess every work is different, and every author, publisher, and agent.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. And I think that's taking us, we've done really good time actually. Timed it to perfection. Thanks, guys. The last question, I guess, is a more informal one, a more fun one. What are you both reading at the moment? And did you discover any new authors during Women in Translation Month that you would like to recommend?
Well, okay. I have just finished a book which we mentioned earlier called Leonard and Hungry Paul, which is not a Women in Translation read, but I was just loving it so much that I've been eking it out over a couple of weeks because it's just so delightful. And it's been like my soothing balm. Like, it literally is incredible. Highly recommended. But I've also just finished listening to the audiobook of My Brilliant Friend. I'm very, very late to the Ferranti party. I'm probably the last person on earth like who hasn't read Elena Ferranti, and I loved the audiobook actually a lot. I listened to it over a couple of months throughout lockdown on long walks, and it's been like my lockdown listen. And I love listening to audiobooks because we spend as translators so much time on screen and reading. It's just so nice to listen. And I'm just about to start for Women in Translation Month with like 5 days to go. Celestial Bodies by Jokha Alhati, I think it's how you pronounce it. Translated by Marilyn Booth, which won the Man Booker last year, and it's been on my list for ages. So I've got it with me where I am, and I'm just about to start reading it. So yeah, I haven't done great on the Women in Translation. I'm like the worst woman in translation this month.
No, you're doing this, so it's great. How about you, Tina? What are you reading at the moment, or what are you about to?
Well, so I've been reading Negar Javadi's book. It's called La Reine, or Arène, actually, Arena. So I just finished that, and I'm about to start my Women in Translation Month gift. I did the sort of book exchange for Women in Translation Month that was arranged by the founder of Women in Translation Month. And the book I received is called Summer of Reckoning, and it's by Marion Brunet, and Catherine Gregor is the translator, and it's a mystery, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also reading the book Ethereal Worlds by Tatiana Tolstaya. That's a translation from the Russian by Anya Migdal, and that is also a finalist for the Oxford Wiedenfeld Translation Prize. So I'm reading that one too. It's beautiful. I recommend it highly.
These sound like great to-do list. I'm glad I'm recording this so I can watch back and write down all these names and titles.
And reading those last two are available on our channel, aren't they, Tina? Of Summer of Reckoning and Ethereal Worlds?
And Ethereal Worlds. Yes, that's it. We actually have readings from both of those books up at Translators Aloud. So
that's amazing.
Go check them out. Yeah.
I'm going to pop all the hashtags and handles on this video later so people can find them easily.
Okay.
Go check that out. And I guess that's it. Thank you both so much for joining. It's been great to talk to you. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to watch us discuss this beautiful career. I guess the last thing I want to say is if you're thinking of starting out as a translator, literary translator as well, best of luck, and I hope this has helped at least a little bit. And from one budding literary translator to another, it's not easy. You will sweat tears of blood, but the reward, I hope you guys agree with me, is amazing. And don't lose hope.
That's right.
Fight that urge to be invisible and get yourself out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys. It's been great.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.